Welcome back to my $700 Volvo overhaul series. This is part 3, and today we're going to be fixing the turn signal you see right here, changing the other spark plugs, and finding the wettest spark plug I have ever seen. We're also going to look under the timing cover to see if we can get a better idea of where oil's coming from. And then we're going to clean the engine up and get it ready for the big work. Before I get started, I noticed there's bird poop on my car, so I'm going to wipe it off so it doesn't damage the paint. Definitely do this anytime. Now that the car's in the garage, let's get it up in the air so we can get started. Cool. Grapes. Ah! Raise it up, line up the blocks, and to jack the car up on the quick jacks, I'm using the jack points used to change your tire because the lift points are a little too far apart for these, which are the SLX 7000s, even with the extensions. So just make sure the jack points are centered on the pads, and then you can raise up the car. Alright, let's go up till it raise up. Touching on the front. I think the rear is kind of higher, but okay, go ahead. Clear these headlights. Click on the other side? It's clicked on my side. Lift over here, you can drop it down. Alright, now, next step. Just get a lift kit so it sits like this all the time. Just kidding. That would be crazy. So one of the issues with this car is that the left turn signal is really intermittent. It's engaged, but nothing's happening. That right turn signal works. Kinda works. Which you can really notice when I'm pulling the car in. Really inconsistent. So I'm gonna pull the stock out, clean up the circuit board, and see how that works. So there are 3 screws here, Torx screws. I'm gonna take those out. So once you have your T25s out, there's 3 of them. You can separate these out. You can pull the rubber trim out here. Probably do it on both sides. Let's see. There we go. And then the 2 panels should separate. Yeah, so you have 1 screw right there, the silver thing here. Bottom right here. So I'm going to try to separate these panels out a little more, unscrew those, and then pull the stock out. So if you release the steering wheel and drop it down, you get really good access up top. And with the small screwdriver, small Phillips head, you can remove 2 of these. And this should allow us to just slide this out. Let me see. that out, pops out. These pins or make the connection here. So next step is to clean off the back of this circuit board. So I'll get some contact cleaner, unscrew this, and take a look. So with the screw undone, you pry it up from the side that the screw is in, because there's a little tab on here on this side, and then gently slide it out towards this way. And on the back, you can see the pads that make the contact on either side. And if you can see, it's a little dark on these pads, so maybe some material built up. So I'm going to spray it with contact cleaner and then maybe clean it up a little bit more. Oops. Now, I ended up rubbing it a bit with an eraser, so I've heard that can work. So we're going to test that out. And it looks a lot better. You can see it was like it was oxidized a bit, so pads are a little more silver colored now. So we're going to reassemble it, pop it back in, and before screwing it in, I'm going to test it. Well, let's see. Right turn signal works. Left turn signal. That looks a lot better. It looks like it worked. Nice. And fun fact, if you're trying to turn your high beams on and they're not staying on, it's because you don't have the low beams on. Your DRLs are your low beams, but it won't remain engaged until you actually set it, your headlights on properly. So, cool. I'm gonna screw this back in, put the two screws in here, snap these back together, and put the Torx screws back in. Pretty quick and easy project. Just gotta be careful clearing these, so you gotta push this up out of the way enough to clear this up and make sure that it lines up properly with the pins. And that's it. So since we already did the 4 and 5 coils and spark plugs, now that's in the garage, we'll do 1, 2, and 3 so that it will run properly. There. There. So here I'm carefully disconnecting all the coil plugs for the harness, just because they're already damaged and I don't want them to get any worse. These are coils, are 8mm bolts. I'll keep these aligned with. Oh,
that's no bueno.
No, it's okay. Oily.
That's bad. It's fine.
This really shouldn't be this tight. It's not a good sign. Maybe someone thought gunning it down would keep the oil in.
I don't know how these cylinders are firing.
Jesus. That's pretty horrible. Just covered in oil. Put it here just in case. this looks dry. That's nice. Still pretty crusty.
It's a tribute to Swedish engineering that this damn thing ran.
We'll deal with that gasket later. So here we can see in cylinder 3 there's some, dirt that collected at the bottom, so that's gonna have to be cleaned out. Cylinder 2 you can see all the oil that pushed past the spark plug, and cylinder 1 just a little bit of dirt. And here I'm using the shop vac to try to get some of the dirt out, and then blowing the cylinders out with some compressed air. And we torque down the spark plugs to 22 foot-pounds. Place the coils back in. They won't seat completely until you put the bolt in, but you can line them up ahead of time. It's got a spring, so. Then reconnect the coil harness. So after checking the gasket on the oil filler cap earlier, we decided to change it with the new one. You can pull out the original one with a pick, and then just pop the new one in.
Okay, let's see what blow by we have.
And here we're leaving the oil cap loose, just to prevent pressure from building up in the crankcase. The smoke we're seeing here is probably because when I blew compressed air into the cylinders, some of the valves were slightly open and it blew oil into the exhaust, so it's just burning off. Change the 3 spark plugs. Remove the spark plugs. Cleaned up. Looked in, saw a lot of oil in cylinders. Cylinder 2, a little bit of oil, cylinder 1. All 3 plugs were gross. Put new spark plugs in, put the coils back on, changed the gasket, oil filler cap, and reassembled and tested it. So it sounds good, if not better, but there's some burning oil. Oh, you know what? When we blew the air into the cylinders, probably sent oil. If any of the valves were open, it went out through there. So while we're checking general tune-up items, it's a good time to check the air filter. And here you can really see how much dust was in it. So with that done, just blowing it out since I don't have a replacement, and I'll be replacing the air filter later. To remove the timing belt cover, there's one 10mm bolt, and you can lift up the coolant reservoir and power steering fluid reservoir out of the way so that you can reach in a little better. To remove the torque bar, there's a 15mm bolt on top and an 18mm bolt on the bottom, or alternatively, you could remove the 2 14mm bolts on the mounting bracket on either side.
Good head.
Then for the top engine mount, it's 18mm on either side. And here we can see the over-tightening mechanic was here too. bar out of the way, you can lift out the timing belt cover. Oh, that's oily.
The question is, where is it coming from?
Here we can really see how oily and dirty things got under the timing cover. Because it's so dirty, it's kind of hard to tell where it's coming from, but currently I think that it's likely to be at the very least from the VVT solenoids because they don't have a gasket. But, you know, there's a possibility it could also be from the VVT hubs themselves and maybe even the crank seal. So the plan now is to clean up the side of the engine so it's easier to see where the leak's coming from. And then with the VVT solenoid gaskets done and the PCV system redone, it'll be easy to see if there's any leaks, where they're coming from. Now, because the gaskets are missing on the VVT solenoids and it's leaking so badly from there, it is possible that this allowed the crankcase pressure to be relieved through there instead of blowing out all the other seals. So fingers crossed that's the case and none of the seals on the VVT hubs or the crankshaft are bad. Right here, since the timing marks were visible, we went in with a paint pen to highlight them a little better so that they'd be easier to find later on. With that done, I'm going to remove the passenger side front wheel to access the side of the engine. To remove the wheel, one 19mm socket, and then your favorite means of removing wheels, so breaker bar, which you probably need to do on the ground to loosen the bolts first. No, not like that. Electric impact or air impact today, so hearing protection. Gloves. Move this out of the way. Put these where you won't lose them, and put them in the wheel. Now, once you've removed your wheel, you see a crease right here, and this is actually here so that once you remove the nut right here, you'll be able to fold it back, clamp it in place. So let's figure out what size that is. It looks like a 10. With that off, pop that off, you'll see it hinges on that crease. And then what you can do is take some vice grips and then this panel here comes off too. Pivot it out of the way, and then clamp it down. There we go. And that exposes the harmonic balancer. We get some more light. See how bad things are. And here we can see it's really oily. So, not a ton of information, but we'll have to see. But yeah, this is pretty bad. Oh, this engine mount needs to be replaced. The boot needs to be moved out of the way. It's hard to tell, but under the balancer doesn't seem to be more oil than anywhere else. So maybe it's leaking from the top. The VVT solenoids, it's unclear. But it's gonna need a big clean. So that done, there's a little bit better access. definitely going to be useful to clean the side of the engine so that once we do the PCV system, we can run the engine and see where the leaks are coming from, if it's the VVT hubs, the crankshaft seal, or if it was just the VVT solenoids up top that just have gasket maker instead of the actual gaskets. So next steps are going to be PCV system and VVT solenoid gaskets. I'm probably going to keep the current VVT solenoids in place since they seem to be working. There weren't any faults. Actually fixed the misfire, so that's a good sign. If not, we did pick up some Volvo branded VVT solenoids from a junkyard car, and we'll be cleaning that up regardless, just to have them as backups. They're pretty easy to access, so I feel like that's a good plan. So after getting in here with some brake clean and some rags for a good amount of time, it looks nice and clean, and it'll allow us to keep an eye out for any leaks after we do the PCV system and the VVT solenoid gaskets. So, later on, if we have a leak at the crank seal, we'll be able to identify it. It's always good to have a clean engine to work with so that you can find out if anything new is happening. Next time, I'm going to replace the VVT solenoid gaskets, which doesn't go as smoothly as it should have. And I'll also install LED headlights and then get started on the PCV system. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.